I'm Niall Paterson. Welcome to the Sky News Daily, coming to you from Brighton Beach. The reason? Sir Ed Davey really does love to be beside the seaside. He arrived in Brighton for the Liberal Democrats' annual party conference by jet ski, mimicking the gimmicks that he came up with during a general election campaign that saw his party win 72 seats. And since arriving here by the seaside, the gimmicks have followed thick and fast. In fact, whilst I'm sitting here wearing my Kiss Me Quick hat and putting my stick of rock to one side, I have in my hands an Ed Davey cookie. He's in his wetsuit on the back of a dirigible, surrounded by some of his colleagues from the party, with a big old smile on his face. One of those images that I'm sure many of you will remember from the general election campaign. The problem is, of course, is that you can't keep just relying on gimmicks. But of course it is about much more than just one man, not even the one man who's sitting next to me here on Brighton Beach, our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Rob, look, I'm holding the cookie in my hand right now. In fact, you know what? I'm going to have a bite of it to see what it is. It does still feel quite gimmicky, and this has been something that's been going on throughout the general election. Has it carried on this week? I've already mentioned the jet ski arrival.
Yeah, it has. It's almost felt, in terms of good, you're eating Ed Davey's face there, yeah?
I can't actually talk. It's really not delicious.
It's felt a little bit like a sort of truncated 4-day version of the 6-week general election campaign. It's sort of hit after heavy hit of Ed Davey's greatest hits, both in terms of the kind of silly stunts. And, you know, I was up the coast from where we're sitting now on Brighton Marina, getting burnt to a crisp on the harbour arm, waiting for him to show up on his jet ski.
Very James Bond.
Yeah, I think the 007 of centrist dads was, I think, licensed to pull off naff stunts.
But does it work, though? I mean, because we are talking about it.
It's easy to, I think, be a bit of a stick in the mud about this stuff, but I think it works, and I think this is the view of a lot of Lib Dem MPs as well, is that it works providing you follow it up and you back it up with the serious stuff and the serious policy talk as well. When he did his arrival on Saturday, I was talking to one of our colleagues in the press pack, whose broadcaster went very prominently on the opening of Lib Dem conference, and they thought it was mainly because the pictures were so good. And, you know, it matters, right? The Lib Dem press office say we're the only people who are doing this visual stuff. So I think it does. If you've got something to look at, something interesting to put at the top of your TV piece, to put on your bulletins, to put on your front page of the paper, I think it does work. I also think Ed Davey, I think he can pull it off, right? He kind of comes across as this sort of slightly, you know, dependable, nice guy. He doesn't take himself too seriously and can kind of pull it off in that sort of slightly jokey way, but then does sort of back it up with serious talk as well.
Possibly, and look, you and I will be heading back in a few minutes' time to go and listen to the speech itself, and we'll get a lot more detail from the man himself. But don't gimmicks like this just remind us of the fact that, you know, ultimately the Liberal Democrats, despite the 72 seats, are something of an electoral irrelevance. We all loved, back in my time as a political correspondent, we loved coming to the Lib Dem conference because your bosses didn't care what you got up to, frankly, most of the time.
I completely disagree there, Neil. I think that's very, very cynical.
But because, even though there was discussion of policy, even though there were prominent politicians, they were the secondary party of opposition, and that remains.
I mean, it's a lot like that, quite frankly, because of the power of Labour. That, you know, you not to get sidetracked onto Labour, but when you have a sort of Prime Minister that doesn't need to listen to his own MPs or his union backers and these huge forces within Labour, if he's not listening to them, why on earth is he going to listen to Ed Davey and his 72 MPs? But I think the Lib Dems are comfortable with that, and I think what they are trying to do is carve themselves out as the credible opposition voice in the country again. And I think that they are trying to get back to a place where, sort of pre-coalition, there were people who, within the Lib Dem sort of parliamentary family, who were seen as very, very respected, credible voices on certain policy areas. You think of people like Norman Lamb on social care, and I guess Vince Cable on the economy. They obviously lost that just by virtue of the fact that when you've only got a handful of MPs, each one of you is trying to get across about 3 different policy areas. I think they are trying to get back to a point where they are sort of relevant and listened to again. And, you know, they will point to things like the windfall tax being the Lib Dems that suggested that first. And I think what they hope now is that they were sort of ignored for those ideas that they came up with first back when they didn't have any MPs. Now they have a bit more of a platform to actually claim some more credit for it.
Yeah, but when so many of your seats came through protest votes, How do you convince the electorate that you are no mere party of protest?
So I think the way you hang on to those, the primary way you do that, I don't think it's to do with what goes on in Westminster. I think it's to do with what the MPs do at a local level. And talking to some new MPs, I've been struck by, they say in terms of the divide between the number of staff they're having back in their constituency office and their Westminster office, overwhelmingly more staff back in the constituency office. One I spoke to a couple of days ago says that in 2 years' time he wants to be able to put on his leaflets, everyone in my patch knows someone that's been helped by me, which is again classic Lib Dem tactics, right, of going back and being local champions and going down to the grassroots and essentially convincing people that maybe did just lend them their votes to kick the Conservatives out, that actually you will get a response to the email from your Lib Dem MP and that they will be sticking up for you, whereas do you really think that the Tory that you might put in there will do that? And that's how they're trying to, I think, cement in some of those sort of lent votes.
What has been the mood then amongst the people you've talked to? And we're talking about new MPs, party staff and the party faithful themselves, because look, this is but the first party conference season after a general election. We're going to have a ton more of them before we get to the next general election. Do the people you've spoken to here think that they could finish the job when it comes to the Conservatives?
Whether they genuinely think it, I'm not sure. That's clearly the message they want to project, and it's been all about leapfrogging the Conservatives. And the Lib Dems will point to the dozens of Conservative-held seats where they were within 10,000 votes of taking at the last election, and will point out that if they are able to take all of those, then they will leapfrog the Conservatives. I think that a lot of this, though, is probably more tied up with what happens to the Tory party in the coming years than it is of what the Lib Dems do. And it's something that I've been trying to get this answer out of Lib Dem activists, officials, and MPs for the last few days, and they're all very reluctant to. They're all on their best behaviour. They don't want to play ball. Asking who would you like to see in charge of the Tory party, and they all kind of go, well, we'll take them all on. But in a cynical political sense, what would be best for the Lib Dems is if they elected someone that was more of a loose cannon who is going to cause absolute chaos in the party and is going to cause the Tories to tear strips out of each other for 5 years. Because then they can go into 2029 saying, you really want these guys to still be, it's the message we're going to hear from Ed Davey today, you want these guys to be the official opposition again? They're not credible enough to even be the official opposition, never mind the government. But if the Tories get their act together and in 5 years' time actually look pretty sensible, then I think that's more difficult as a quad bike pulls up next to us on Brighton Beach.
Oh, that's Brighton Baywatch. No, but you were saying so there is a view, isn't there, that there is an opportunity for the Liberal Democrats presenting itself not just by the number of seats that they've gathered and so on, but by the kind of the parliamentary theatre that we are seeing. So what does Ed Davey need to do? We're going to have to head back in a second to listen to the speech itself. What does he need to do, and who really is he speaking to?
Lib Dems don't necessarily feel it is unbelievably pressing to do this soul searching. I think they are having a conference where they're sort of getting to know each other and kind of basking in their electoral success, quite frankly. I don't think there's anything necessarily that he needs to do in this speech. I think what he needed to do, he's already done. He's rehabilitated the party. He's brought them back. He's done more than what he needed to, quite frankly. So actually, I think his speech, I don't think there's going to be that much in it that's terribly new. I think it's going to be basically a lot of what we've heard before. I think there's plenty of potential for tension in the years to come, though. You think of, the way the party has been described to me, by a senior person, was we're the party of Middle England now. Now, is the party of Middle England that will be trying to sort of go into constituencies in like Hampshire and parts of Shropshire, rural areas, quite pro-Brexit areas that voted, quite pro-Brexit back in 2016, is the sort of party of Middle England still compatible with some of the real kind of get the pulse racing topics that Lib Dem activists still have? Electoral reform, that is something you don't hear the senior top brass of the Lib Dems talk much about anymore, because I think they see it as an irrelevance to, there's no votes in it for them. Brexit, it's, they say, look, that doesn't come up on the doorsteps, that's why we don't talk about it. But there was a one former Lib Dem MP, Tom Brake, that has been on the podium saying we need to take this opportunity to make the case for electoral reform, because if we are able to get a moment where we can get a vote on it, we are not going to win if we've not spent years sort of prepping them.
Do you know what, Rob? So taken have I been with your analysis, I've just been sitting here munching that Ed Davey biscuit and my mouth is entirely full. So should we head back in and have a listen to Ed? Good stuff. We will be back in just a moment with full coverage of Sir Ed Davey's speech to the Lib Dem party conference. If I can get this biscuit out of my mouth. Welcome back to the Daily. Niall Paterson here. Rob and myself have made our way up and into the conference hall because we are just minutes away from hearing Sir Ed Davey. We've moved from beach to speech, you might say, along with the hundreds that will be gathering in the hall itself to listen to the Lib Dem leader. What is he going to focus on? Well, you certainly got to expect that the general election will be a big part of his speech. Also the NHS, they've been making hay about it already this Parliament. But how does a party like the Liberal Democrats differentiate themselves from the others that sit on the opposition benches and indeed from the government that comes in the shape of Labour at the moment? We'll get a bit of that in the speech, so let's sit back and have a listen.
Using our strength as not only once again the third party in the House of Commons, but also the largest third party in a century, to be the responsible opposition to this government and to speak up for people in our communities taken for granted and ignored by the others. Telling ministers directly about the problems real people are facing, raising the issues that would otherwise go unnoticed in the government's blind spots. Holding Labour to account for the promises they made to clear up the Conservatives' mess. Championing practical, hopeful solutions for a better future, not just on health and care, but the cost of living, sewage, nature, and the climate, the crisis in our justice system, prisons bursting at the seams, criminals walking free, victims denied justice, and the pressing need to fix our broken relationship with Europe. And now, Emily and I, caring for our wonderful, smiley, 16-year-old son, John, with his challenges from his severe disabilities. You saw in that video just a little glimpse of the joy John brings to our lives, the fun we have together. Even at 5:30 in the morning, when he shouts, "Daddy," to wake me up, it's a blessing, given he was 9 years old when he was first able to say, "Daddy." But alongside the fun and the blessings, I have to tell you, caring for your family can be tough. Just dealing with whatever comes each day, making plans that too often fall through. As millions of people across our country know, a carer's life is often exhausting. And you know, each time I speak about my story, I'm humbled by the number of people who get in touch to say, "That's my story too." We can't let them back after all the damage they've done to our great country. We can't let them off the hook after the chaos and misery they've caused. Friends, our job is to consign the Conservative Party to the history books.
Well, with several puffs of confetti, if you can believe it. That is it. The 2024 Liberal Democrat Conference is over, and Ed Davey, currently taking, well, a fantastic reception from the party faithful, will soon be exiting stage right. The speech is done, but was the job done? Myself and my colleague Rob, well, let's go and speak to a few of his colleagues to see what they thought. Tim Farron, could you, as a former leader, mark the current leader's homework? How did he do?
Excellent. I mean, I think the great thing about it was he managed to identify a lot of the problems that the country faces. Obviously, we rightly celebrated the fact that that was an outstanding result for us. You can't knock the fact that we've got more MPs than in our party's history, even in the Liberal movement's history since the early 1920s. But at the same time, it was a solution-heavy and future-facing speech. It was all about recognising that, you know, Britain has a new government, but it needs a strong and effective opposition. And it wasn't just about, doing yah-boo sucks and throwing bricks at the new Labour government. It was about trying to be constructive and offering solutions on social care, on water quality, on education, and on foreign policy. It was a serious speech from a serious leader from a party that has arrived.
So the question then, he provided the answer, but you might want to put it into your own words. The question is always, what do you do with 72 MPs in a parliament set up in the way in which this one is?
Be credible. I mean, when all said and done, a lot of the kind of fun we had during the election campaign, A, it keeps you going and that's a good thing, but B, it got us the ability to make our point, to get our case across. When I was falling in Windermere with Ed, you got a little vignette of what that was all about. So we mucked about and got on the telly, and then loads of journalists paddled out to us and asked us serious questions about Ukraine, social care and water quality. So what the 72 MPs in Parliament does is gives us that credibility. We have the ability now, we've got the nation's attention, what we're going to do about it. So it's a triumph, great. More than a triumph, it's a ticket to the big league, and our job now is not to stay up for one season, it's to make sure that we go on, push forward and be a genuine alternative to a Labour government who have started underwhelmingly.
Layla Moran, what did you make of that today? Obviously, fantastic general election result, but this is where the hard work starts, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think he really captured it in this speech. Yes, we have come so far in such a short period of time, but we have a huge amount of work still to come. I thought the speech was optimistic. It gave a liberal vision for Britain, talking about the issues people really care about, the NHS and sewage, and the mood in the hall could not have been more jubilant.
Well, let's speak to someone who hasn't been with the party very long, the relatively newly elected MP for Bicester and Woodstock, also back in 1995 member of the Scottish Schools debating team, Calum Miller. Good to see you again, mate.
Thanks, Neil.
What did you think Ed Davey needed to do today?
I think Ed needed to rally the team and to celebrate the success we've just had in these elections, but also to give us a really clear vision of what it means to be a constructive opposition to this new Labour government and to take the challenge to them.
But how do you offer an opposition when, frankly, everyone's eyes are always on the Conservatives? You are the third largest party.
Well, I think people's eyes are on the Conservatives just now, but if they are, they're probably very wide open and slightly surprised by what they're seeing. I think we've got a real chance in this Parliament to show that we're serious about policy and about change in our country. That's what we were elected on, just as Labour was elected to deliver change. And we'll be holding them to account to see if that's actually what they come up with. And when we've got better ideas than them, we'll fight for them. And when they've got good ideas, we'll back them. But I think that's what constructive opposition looks like. And I think most people looking at the Conservatives today have no confidence that's what they'll get from them.
Well, I've moved away from the conference hall proper to try and find somewhere just a little bit quieter to catch up again with Rob Powell. Rob, look, what did you make of that? I mean, from the moment they wandered on stage to, what was it? Yes, ABBA, Take a Chance on Me. I mean, it was clear that the time for gimmicks, the time for eye-catching stuff isn't quite over for the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was all right. But the thing is, in any normal year, like pre the July election, I think that would have been fine. I just feel when you have had the best general election result you have ever had for your party, 6-fold increase in the number of MPs, you've taken, 3 or 4 seats held by previous Tory prime ministers, you have rehabilitated your party, dug them up from life support and have put them back as the third party in British politics again with a bigger number of MPs than you've ever had. I just think he could have set pulses racing a little bit more than he did, quite frankly. I thought it was a little bit run-of-the-mill. Yeah, but I don't think there were any standing ovations in the middle of it. And the biggest applause that seemed to happen during it seemed to be when he said he hoped Kamala Harris beat Trump.
So content-wise then, what was it you were looking for that we missed? Because we got the stuff about the family background. We got the stuff about him being a carer for his mum. We got the stuff about him being a carer for his child, his grandparents. We got the stuff, the cheering about the 72 MPs and places that the Liberal Democrats never thought they could have in the past. What else?
Look, I don't think it was so much that there was individual topics that were missed. I think he ticked off all the stuff content-wise that he needed to do. He spent a lot of time attacking the Conservatives, not that much time attacking Labour. I think the reason for that is because actually it works rather well for the Lib Dems if Labour are more successful and the Conservatives go to bits, because I think if you've got a Labour Party that voters start to get scared of, that might mean that people start to flip back to Tory in some of their constituencies. So he did that. I thought the passage where he talked about people that had gone in contact with him after he shared the story of caring for his son was very powerful. When he talked about, being worried about when they're gone, who's going to look after them, and how he feels heard and seen now, basically. I thought that was very powerful as well. I think my criticism isn't so much in kind of content, it's more just in how it was pulled off. There's a little bit of soul searching going on in this conference, but it's mainly all about celebration. And I think, no one will have come away from that feeling downtrodden or glum, but I think he could have done a little bit more to lift spirits and a little bit more to kind of ram home quite how well they did in that general election. And where they are now.
In my notes, I have written down here, feels a bit like an end-of-term assembly. Awards are being handed out, profuse thank yous to the dinner ladies and the janitor. Everyone's just a little bit demob happy. I, however, though, thought one section, which resonated, I thought, not just with the people in the hall, but will resonate with political opponents, is the way in which he pointed out, at one point not that long ago, we were thinking we were toast in electoral terms. And now, look around us on the opposition benches. It's not us who's feeling nervous. It's the Tories.
Yeah, absolutely. Also on policy level, the big news line that they were pushing from this speech, which I don't think got like an explicit mention in there, actually. It was this idea of setting up a winter pressures task force, which there was a passage where he talked about, every year we talk about winter pressures and we really need, this is all short-termism, which is a very Starmery thing to say, actually. It's very similar to what Starmer said about things like the NHS. But the actual policy was basically set up a task force, take the money that you spend on winter pressures over the next 4 years, give the task force control of that, and get them to try and get in early before these problems arise.
Liberal Democrat leaders, particularly at party conference, do tend to rely on anecdote as much as big kind of broad sweeping policy. And there was an awful lot of anecdote in what Sir Ed was talking about, particularly as regards his role as carer for mother and for child. I just wonder, we have heard this so often, so many times. I'm wondering if first and foremost, it's maybe beginning to lose some of its impact. Secondly, if that is the case, that we're perhaps moving into, the same period that Sir Keir Starmer moved into when he was pilloried by people for forever mentioning the fact that his dad was a toolmaker.
I think the two are a little bit different in that I think it's sort of easier to, the my dad's a toolmaker thing, it gets mocked because I think it's seen as a way for Keir Starmer to kind of kick back against some of the stereotypes that people have towards him. It's sort of a way of him saying, look, I'm working class, basically. I don't think that the Ed Davey talking about, his family is the same thing. I think what it is talking about why he cares so much about the NHS and healthcare and social care. He's not doing this for us, quite frankly, is he? He's not doing it to entertain us. He's doing it to try and get people to contact him and to inform people about why he cares about this stuff.
In brief, Ed Davey and his colleagues will be heading back to Parliament pretty satisfied with the past few days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a celebration, basically. There have been last year you had the sort of brawl about development with young Liberals. There's been nothing of that. And I mean, we've been going around as annoying journalists, always try to do at these conferences and trying to poke people and trying to get them to say, well, do you think they should be talking more about electoral reform, or it's not talking about Brexit much? And most people actually, got a few people that are saying that, but most people, hell, when you've just led your party to a 72-seat victory, I think you probably get given a little bit of bandwidth to kind of revel in it for at least a little bit.
And that is your lot from this edition of The Daily, all the way from Brighton, including the beach. We will be back at base tomorrow with much, much more of the same. We'll see you then.